Alrighty, in this video we are going to continue with our lobby system. So let's just go ahead and launch this and kind of go down the list of things that we're going to have to implement. So let's give this a sec for my database to spool up. So when we create a lobby, we see the lobby being created in the lobbies window, but we don't switch over in the UI to the lobby window in order to see all of the players in the lobby and have the ability to either start the game, abandon the game, or change your parameters, your options, be it your team or your hero. So I think that's probably going to be the first thing that we're going to do. So let's jump into that scene here. That's going to be under lobby. Remember, we do have our lobby and our lobbies windows. So our lobby window, we want to set to be active when we're in a lobby. So there's a couple ways we can go about doing this. The concern, obviously, that I have is that the lobby system itself is instantiated and destroyed dynamically, whereas the main lobby system is available on the screen. So I think one way to go about doing this would be to create a mono behavior that represents this lobby screen and then have our game lobby system kind of defer into that mono behavior. So, and of course, that mono behavior will have fields for start, destroy, team, hero, and the players list and the leave lobby button. So I'll move this off to the side and let's go ahead and create that mono behavior. So I'm going to jump into the client code here. And the first thing that we have to ask is what namespace do we want to put that in? So right now we have our game lobby system and our main lobby system, but we're going to need a class to sort of contain that those references to those UI objects. I think in this case it would make sense to put it in this namespace simply because we already have a mono behavior that's used for a similar purpose within this namespace. So if we start creating a bunch of these classes that their only use is to hook in to the Unity editor, we might create a namespace for that. But for now, I'll just stick it in master server. So now the question is what do we call it? We can just go ahead and call it lobby window UI. Or how about just lobby window? And the lobby window will be a mono behavior that we'll have instantiated on our scene. And of course, it's going to have those fields. So it's going to have a start, destroy, and that's going to have drop downs for heroes and teams. Now, actually, I don't think it's going to be necessary, actually, to get a reference to the start and destroy buttons. But we will have to get a reference to the admin toolbar to show or hide it depending on if you're the lobby owner. So we do need that reference. So I'll do a public game object, and I'll call this admin toolbar. We're going to need a public game object player list, and we're also going to need a public game object for all those players in the list. And I kind of want to follow the same naming convention that I used in the other lists. So I'm going to jump over into systems, main lobby system, and take a look at how I named those. So I had lobby list and lobby row prefab. So I'm going to just follow that sort of convention here. So I'm going to have player list and public game object player row prefab. And then we'll probably create another object similar to our player row in this class as well. Now we are going to need a reference to the game lobby system. So I'm going to say public void set lobby system, and I'm going to do game lobby system, which will simply say underscore system equals system. I'm not using a setter here or a property here, because I kind of consider the setting of the lobby system to be more of an operation than a setting of data. Even though the word set is in there, I prefer it to be a method over a property, just on the basis that it's not really a piece of data in so much as it's changing the behavior of how the lobby window is gonna work. So we're going to need events event handlers for starting, destroying, and leaving. So I'll say public void start game, public void destroy game, and public void leave lobby. Now all of these are going to basically invoke system.proxy, which we don't have access to. We don't have access to the proxy field, the proxy property of the system, because we have set that to protected. I think I'm going to open that up a bit, just like I did with server. I know it's breaking encapsulation a little bit, But in this case, this is such a small class, and I would really prefer the system proxy to be available here. The only other alternative is on the system itself. If I made a start game method that just deferred into the proxy itself, that's one way to go about sort of hiding the reference to the proxy. But I think that I'm not going to worry too much about that encapsulation. So to fix that, we'll head on over to our infrastructure namespace into our Unity system base, and I'm going to go ahead and set the proxy to public and the context to public. Okay, with that out of the way, we can now, in our start game method of our lobby window, I can say system proxy start game, or begin game. Let's go ahead and use the same terms here. So I'm going to say, call this method begin game. And I do want to show a alert dialog with a status message and have all that deferred awesomeness in this method. So at this point, I think it might be a good idea to sort of figure out what I'm doing about this pattern here. This pattern is going to be very, very common, like I said in the last video. You create a dialogue, you set the title, you perform a deferred action. On success, you close it, and on failed, you show the error. So we might want to start thinking of how we can turn this into a method where we don't have to write this all the time. So I think the simplest way to go about doing this would be to jump into our alert dialog prefab. And I'm going to add a couple properties here, or a field, one field here. I'm going to add a private deferred, and we'll call this deferred. And then I'm going to go ahead and write a method here. I'm going to write public deferred, and we'll make this we'll make a non-generic form of it first. And I'll say something like I don't know, attach deferred, or wait for deferred, or wait for maybe, or something like that. Maybe wait for. So wait for, or wait for, and it'll take in a deferred, and it'll also take in a Boolean close on success, Boolean show error. And before we implement that, I'm also going to write an overload, deferred wait for deferred deferred, and this one is just going to return wait for deferred true true. And so I'm just doing that there so that we can fill in those parameters. Of course, in Unity we can't use default parameters because that is a C#4 feature. So for the wait for deferred, I'm going to say if deferred does not equal null, I'll say throw new invalid operation exception. We are already waiting on another deferred. I consider this to be a, if you invoke wait for multiple times, I would consider that to be an error, because it doesn't really make sense to wait on multiple deferreds. And at the moment, there's no way to unsubscribe from a deferred. So if we waited for multiple deferreds and we didn't have this check in here, we would have an issue where the first deferred to succeed would cause our stuff to be invoked. Then I'm simply going to say deferred dot on success. Well, actually, I'm first going to say this dot set can dismiss to false, because we never want to be able to dismiss the dialog while a deferred is going on. Then I want to say deferred dot on success. Actually, I'll just wrap this in the if statements. I'll say if close on success, deferred on success, close. In fact, we can just wrap that in there like that. Else, or sorry, not else, if show error. Actually, I don't like the name of that. This should be show error on fail, just to be consistent with the close on success. So it's kind of the same deal here. And then we're going to say deferred on fail, def goes into, and we're going to go ahead and say set title, error, set message, def.error, set can dismiss to true. So the same sort of thing there. And then we'll return the deferred. Well, actually, no, I want to return this. I want to keep with the Fluent API I have going here, where I return the alert dialog. My thinking was by returning the deferred, we can chain on wait for deferred, and then we can chain on another on success. But I think it actually makes more sense to return the alert dialog back, because every other method in this class does that. So we'll leave it like that. Next up, I want to create a generic form of this, a generic overload. So I'm going to say public alert deferred of t, wait for deferred of t deferred. Of course, I need to announce my generic parameter, and then we'll simply say return wait for, passing in deferred true and true. Wondering though if I can just take this stuff. Oh yeah, I have a couple problems here in my wait for. I'm going to go ahead and take this. I'm going to cut it, and then I'm going to, of course, set deferred to deferred, but then I'm also going to invoke a method that is simply wait for internal deferred close on success, show error on fail. Now, I still have what used to be here on my clipboard. Then underneath all this, I'm going to write a private wait for internal deferred of deferred bool close on success bool show error on fail. Actually, I can also take that code right there and take it and cut it down here. So now we just have a two-line method for our wait for, and wait for internal does everything there. Of course, I'm getting a little used to JavaScript right now, so I forgot to add a return type. So all right, so this wait for will return wait for deferred true true, which won't compile until, whoops, not alert dialog of t, just alert dialog. It won't compile until we do an alert dialog of wait for t deferred of t deferred bool close on success bool show error on fail, and then we can basically say wait for internal, passing in our deferred close on success show error on fail, return this. So the reason, actually, there is no reason for me to have a generic overload of this right now. Okay, so the reason I added these generic overloads was because originally we were returning deferreds. That's kind of what I had in mind at the beginning, but since I changed my mind, we actually don't need these generic overloads anymore. And the reason we don't is because the deferred of t's inherit from deferreds. So actually, I can go ahead and nuke that, and I can take all this code back here and paste it in here, because we no longer need this method to abstract that. Okay, well, that was a bit of a roller coaster. Basically, that's all we have ended up here. So yeah, that's kind of my thought process as I was kind of changing the API around. But I think, again, it's a good idea for us to return an alert dialog and not a deferred like I had originally thought, because that makes it more consistent with the rest of the methods here. So we'll just leave it as this. And so now that we've done that, I can hop on over, maybe full screen this. Now that we've done that, we can come into our main lobby system and we can change this up a little bit. We no longer, so for our join lobby row, which is on our main lobby service, we can go ahead and remove the set can dismiss. But for this, what we can do is we can say dot wait for, and then simply wait for proxy.join lobby row details ID. And now we can nuke all of that code. So all that code goes away. In fact, we no longer even need to reference the dialog anymore, so we can remove that local variable. And we can do the same thing here. We can remove the setCanDismiss call, and we can simply say wait for proxy.createLobby. And then we can go ahead and nuke that. Now, if we wanted the result of proxy.createLobby, obviously we could take this and extract it. So we have, operation or whatever, and then we can do an operation dot on success, and we can get the details of the lobby if we wanted to do it that way. But this way has the least amount of code. So I kind of like that. It's very, very straightforward. So with that out of the way, we can move on to our lobby window. So again, that's what the code looks like now, and these are the things we added to the wait for on the alert dialog. Of course, you can't see the deferred private variable or private field you're going to want to add. But anyway, closing that out, let's jump over to the lobby window. So for the begin game, we can simply say system.context prefabs instantiate alert dialog, and we simply say set title starting game dot wait for system proxy begin game. And that fixes that code. So destroy game is the same same concept. System context prefabs. Actually, I kind of want to alias out system.context. So system.context returns a game context. Up here, I'll say private game context. And then in my set lobby system, I'll say context equals system.context. And then for this, instead of doing system context, we can now just do underscore context. So for this, we'll do context prefabs instantiate alert dialog set title destroying game, or destroying lobby is what I should be calling it. Wait for system proxy destroy lobby. And I'm going to change the name of this method to destroy lobby. Now for leave lobby, same deal. Context prefabs instantiate alert dialog set title leave lobby wait for system proxy leave lobby. So those are our three methods that we are going to be handling from the user interface. They're simply going to pass it into the server, tell the server what to do, and prevent us from interacting with the user interface while it's going about doing that stuff. Now the last thing I want to handle in this, obviously we have to implement this on the server side, which we're going to try to do in this video. But I also want to be able to handle showing who is on the current lobby. I actually did just have another interesting idea. Actually, we can actually make this class a little bit more generic, and maybe this is a pattern that I'll continue to use. By on the set lobby system, maybe we can rename this to simply init. And instead of taking in a game lobby system, we can take in a game context and an I game lobby system server proxy. So for this, we'll change context equals context, and then proxy equals proxy. And then we'll just put it up there, and we'll move this down here, and we'll remove our reference to system, and then we'll change our references to proxy to simply proxy.beginGame underscore proxy, and then underscore proxy. And my reasoning here is this actually makes this component a little bit more generic, which is and actually more decoupled, and I kind of like that. I don't know if I'll continue to follow this pattern throughout the rest of the code, but it makes this not have any sort of dependence on the concrete implementation of the system. And if we were doing unit testing, for example, would make this significantly easier to test. Well, anyway, we also need to handle showing the list of players. And to do that, we're going to need to handle a variety of different events, which will be passed in from the game system. And those events that we're going to need to deal with are going to be the on lobby updated, player entered, player updated, player left, and game started and game failed to start. Actually, we'll just deal with these for now. So I'm going to move this over here to the side, and I'm going to create those methods. And they're going to closely resemble the methods that we had in the main lobby system. So to do that, I'm going to first start off by creating a private class, and I'll call this player row. And he's going to follow the same pattern that we established in the master server systems main lobby system, where he takes in a game object, and then he has a set details. So for player row, we're going to take in a game object, and this is going to be called, what did we call it in the main lobby system? We just called it game object. Game object, and player details. What? Game lobby player details. Details, or how about player? And in our main lobby system, we just did that, and we aliased out the text. Actually, no, we didn't take in a game lobby player details for that. Okay, so then we aliased out text, so we'll do a private read-only text. And we'll do text equals game object get component in children, and we'll pass in text. So for this, we're doing a very simple player row where we just have one text field in our game object. If you wanted to make this more interesting, where each player row had an interesting user interface, maybe buttons and other things like that, or maybe a context menu for kicking players or whatever, obviously what you would do is you would create a mono behavior to encapsulate all those fields, and then create a prefab with that mono behavior with references to them. But in this case, we're just dealing with a game object that has a text component in it somewhere. And then we're simply going to write a update or public void set player details, and we'll do game lobby player details, and we'll do details. Actually, we don't need to alias. Well, we do actually. We need to create a public game lobby player details get private set. How do we do this with the lobby row? The lobby row, we did take in the details, and you know what? I think that makes more sense. Yeah, I'm going to do it that way. We are going to take in a game lobby player details as a constructor parameter, and then underneath this, we're going to say set player details. So we'll do that in the constructor. And then for the details, we are also going to follow this, and let's see here. Okay, so the way we handled that is we set the details to details before, and then we merged in the changed values. So if details.id does not equal details.id, notice the capitalization, throw new, pretty sure I passed the argument exception for that. No, invalid operation, whatever. Invalid operation exception, cannot set details for another player. And then we'll say if details.changed has flag? Contains flag, and we'll do fields, which is of course game lobby player details fields, name, then details.name equals details.name. Notice the capitalization. I'm going to copy and paste this 3 times, and we'll do hero, hero equals hero, and then team equals team. So we're just merging in the changed values. I'm not so certain about this pattern at this point as far as passing in changed values here. Just in this case where we're regenerating the entire text string every time one of these values changes. However, in a scenario where you have different user interface widgets per each one of these values, then it would make a lot more sense to have it this way. So it gives us more flexibility, but unfortunately has a little bit more code, which is pretty much true for everything. And we're going to say text.text equals, and then we're simply going to say details.name. And then I'm going to just delineate these by slashes. I'll do a string format for this. String.format, we'll do our name, followed by a slash, followed by a team, followed by a slash, followed by a hero. Not going to be pretty, but it'll work for now. We'll do details name, details team, and details hero. Remember, note the capitalization since we have 2 variables called details. In fact, to make this a little bit more clear, I could maybe go ahead and change the name of the parameter to updated fields, or updated details. And we'll do that. So now it's a little bit more clear that when we're dealing with the updated details versus the details we already have on this object. Anyway, again, this class can do a lot more interesting things if we had a more interesting user interface. So I'm kind of leaving it here as sort of placeholder for that sort of thing. But anyway, so that's our player row. So let's go ahead and jump up to the top here because we will need a dictionary to handle that. So I'm going to say private dictionary of int and player row, and we'll just simply call this players. And I'll go ahead and instantiate this in the init method. Say players equals new dictionary of int player row. And now that I have that done, I can scroll down here. I'm going to do this all the way at the bottom. So remember to instantiate your players dictionary. Just to here at the bottom, I'm going to have these methods that are going to be called invoked by the system, and they're going to be things like adding a player, removing a player, updating a player. So I'll say public void add player, game lobby player details player. And for this, we are basically, again, going to follow the exact same pattern. So on lobby created, for example, we create the game object, we create the row, and we set its parent, and we add it to our dictionary. So we're going to do the same thing here. Say var game object equals instantiate, and remember our player row prefab. And then I'm going to say var row equals new player row, passing in our game object and our player. And then I'm going to say game object dot transform dot set parent transform, or sorry, not transform, player list true. I don't actually like using game object here because it hides the field game object. What did we do here before? Okay, we just prefixed it with that. I'm going to call this player game object. And for set parent, I always forget that. We want to do dot transform. And then we simply do players dot add player dot ID followed by row. And we're also going to have a public update player game lobby player details player. And in this case, did we throw an exception if we... no, we simply logged an error. So I'm going to say player row row, if not players try get value player ID out row, then debug.log error could not find player ID, and then return. Otherwise, we simply do row.setPlayerDetails player. And then we'll have public void remove player, and this will just take an ID. And for this, I'm going to do the same thing. In fact, I'm just going to copy and paste this code up here. And I'm going to say row dot... How did we do that before here? On player destroyed, we just destroyed row.gameObject. Unfortunately here, gameObject is a private read-only field, so to fix that, I'm going to hit Control-Shift-R, select Encapsulate Field, and hit Enter twice. And then maybe move this down so it's next to the other public property. So I just basically just changed the this private field into a public property. So now we can say Unity engine.game .object.destroy row game object, and then we can say underscore players dot remove int ID. I do like to fully qualify this. I think I mentioned this in the previous videos because it will conflict with the system.object class, and I don't want that. All right, of course we do need to fix that bug right there. Copying and pasting that didn't work because we only have access to the ID. Okay, so now that we have that done, we have this lobby window. I'll scroll through this code real fast. So we have our fields, we have our init, we have our public game objects that'll be attached from the editor. We have our events that'll be handled from the user interface. And then we have the methods that are going to be invoked by the system itself, and then we have our player row. And so yeah. Now what we can do is jump into the main lobby system, and I'm going to scroll all the way to the top, and I'm going to add a new public field for public lobby window. So we'll be able to, in the editor, associate the lobby window with this public field, and then we'll be able to gain access to this lobby window from our game lobby system. So let's go ahead and do that. In our game lobby system, I also will need a reference to our lobbies window so I can hide that. So I'll do public game object lobbies window, and the lobbies window will be hidden when the game lobby system is active, and it'll be shown when the game lobby system is inactive. So jumping into the game lobby system, let's go ahead and do this. So on connected, we want to, well, we first want a private field here. We want a private lobby window. And then on unconnected, we want to simply say window equals context. How do we get a reference? Well, we do need to be able to get a reference to our main lobby system game object. And the only way to do that, I think, so we have this game context, and it has this concept of a iConnection manager, which sort of encapsulates a connection to the server. And in our master server right here, he's a iConnection manager, and he has the access to the systems module. And then the systems module is, of course, what has access to the systems, which has a reference to the main lobby main lobby system. So what I'm going to do here is, in the game context, I think I'm going to create... yeah, I think in the game context, I'm going to come down here, and how about after our awake method, I'm going to say public t get connection manager of t, and I'm going to say where t is implements I connection manager, and then I'm going to say var manager equals connection manager as t. If manager is null, then throw a new invalid operation exception. Cannot cast connection manager does not equal null. Connection manager. Well, actually, hold on. Here's what I'm going to do. Cannot get connection manager of type of t.name because the connection manager, and I'll add a plus here so we get another line, and then I'll say connection manager does not equal null, goes into, or does not equal null. If it's not null, we'll say is of type connection manager dot get type dot name, otherwise is null. Okay, let's see if we can clean this code up here a little bit. So we have that, we'll break it out there, and we'll break it out there, and I think that's pretty straightforward. Expression is always true. Connection manager is never null. Are you sure about that? Well, just in case. I guess I never set connection manager to null anywhere, but just in case connection manager is ever null, I'll go ahead and do that. For this, we can't use the as operator because we also need to add a generic constraint that it is a class and not a structure. Okay, with that out of the way, we'll simply return manager. So this way we'll be able to convert the connection manager into an expected type, and if it's not that type, we'll throw an exception. And I think that's important here because we want to make sure that the game lobby system can have access to the currently instantiated systems. But if for some reason that code is running when we're in a different context, maybe in an actual game connected to the region servers and not the master server, it'll throw an exception. And that gives us some type safety there. Albeit runtime type safety, but whatever. So now we can jump into the game lobby system, and I can say window equals context get connection manager as master server dot systems dot get main lobby system dot lobby window. And that's how we access the lobby window. So we're reaching into the context, we're getting the connection manager of manager system, we're accessing the systems module, which we abstracted away so we can use the system modules in multiple connections. Then getting the instances of the systems out of that, and then finally getting the main lobby system. If you want to take a look at the game context, so here's that code right here. I, again, don't understand why it's saying that is always true. Is there like an operator precedence issue going on right now? Looks like there is. That's weird. Maybe ReSharper's just freaking out. I don't know. Anyway, adding those parentheses fixed that warning. So now in our game lobby system, after we do that, we can say window.init, passing in our context and passing in our proxy. So now our window is initialized. So with that, on our onPlayer entered, we're just going to defer into the window. We're going to do window add player. OnPlayer updated is simply going to be window.update player. OnPlayer left is window.remove player ID. So very, very, very straightforward implementation here. But with that, I think we should now be able to see the player. Oops, we do need to have the window actually be set to active when we join. So I'll say window.gameObject.is or active. Oops, set active is true. And I'm also going to say I'm going to have to alias this out into a variable. So I'm going to grab that and say main lobby, so that I can say main lobby dot lobbies window set active as false. So make sure you do that. Actually, I think I'll go so far to turn this into a field. So I'm going to say introduce field. And so now we have a private main lobby system main lobby that we can now access from all the methods in this class. So take a look at that code for a second. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do the opposite down here at the bottom. So I'm going to go all the way to the bottom, and I'm going to add an overriding method for disposing. I'm simply going to say when we dispose this system, I want window.gameObject set active to false, and I want main lobby.lobbies window set active to true. Anyway, let's jump back into Unity and jump into, let's make sure, oh, we still have to actually wire up all our stuff. So for our lobby, I'm going to come down here, I'm going to open up our code, master server, lobby window, add it as a thingy, doesn't derive from mono behavior. Yes, it does. Game's not showing up. Oh, I have a, do I have a compiler error? Maybe? Yes, I have a compiler error. Let's hit F6 in Visual Studio to track down the compiler error. We get a build successful, so something weird is going on here. Game object get must have a body because it's marked as... Okay, I'm going to copy this, hit Control-ET, and we're on lobby window line 90. It doesn't like lobby window line 90. Now, it's weird that builds in Visual Studio, but it doesn't build in... Oh! Well, the reason why it builds in Visual Studio and doesn't build in Unity is because we're using... ReSharper decided to use a C# 7 feature, which obviously isn't going to work with the Unity's mono compiler. So go ahead and add that private set in there if you hadn't already figured that out. And now we should be able to come down here and say lobby window, add this. Then for our admin toolbar, we simply drag over our admin toolbar. For our player list, I'm going to do players viewport content. And I'm going to delete all the existing content out of this. And for our player row prefab, I should just be able to grab our whatever prefab that we used before our player row. I'm just going to reuse that. So in our lobby, I'm going to scroll down here to our player row prefab and grab player row, dump it right there. And that is our lobby window. So now the last thing we need to do is go into our main lobby system and hook up these two components into this. So I'm going to drag over lobby panel into lobbies. What? No. I'm going to drag lobby over into lobby window, and I'm going to drag lobbies into lobbies window. Now, one more thing I want to do. Well, actually, we can go ahead and also in our lobby window, we can wire up these events. So for start, I'll come down here to our event handlers. I'll click add. I'll drag over our lobby window into the game object. Then for the function, we'll do lobby window, and then we'll do wherever start game is, or begin game. For destroy, I'll do the same thing. Drag over lobbies, come down here, do lobby window, and we'll do destroy lobby. And then for our leave lobby, we'll do the same thing. We'll just hook that up, come down here, and do leave lobby. So now all the events are hooked up. And I think one more thing I want to do actually in the code. So I want to, when the game starts, I want to go ahead and automatically have this lobby window being hidden and this lobbies window being shown, so that I don't have to worry about making sure they're shown and hidden in the editor before I build the scene. So in my main lobby system, on awake, I'm, or actually on connected. I'm going to go ahead and say lobby window dot game object set active false, and then I'll do lobbies window set active to true, so we don't have to worry about that. Anyway, with that out of the way, we should be able to come up here, jump into our awesome scenes loader. I didn't mean to hit pause. Log in as a user and create a new lobby, and check that out. We are in a lobby. So the final test I want to do in this video is go ahead and build out an external player. And now these lobbies aren't being destroyed, and that's going to be something we'll look into at some point here in the future. Actually, I think I simply just didn't implement that feature. Anyway, so we'll go ahead and log in as admin. And I messed up that build a little bit. So we'll restart that. And then in Unity, we'll log in as admin. And here I'll log in as Nelson. And then I'll have Nelson create a lobby. So Nelson is added. And then we'll join Nelson's lobby. And now we see we have a 2 players. And we can add as many players as we want. And if we hit destroy or start, it'll say there was a fatal error. And that's because on the server side, we have it throwing a not implemented exception. But anyway, so that is that. I guess we will see you guys in the next video.